So hello again to another of our series of interviews with experts in their field, things that hopefully will be very useful to you as business owners. This week, I'm joined by James Goldthorpe from Words by Jim, who's going to talk about writing in general, to be honest. So James, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rupert. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and so I suppose the first question is, why are words so important?
Blimey, chuck me in the deep end there. I mean, in the grand scheme of the world, obviously they're absolutely vital. But in terms of businesses, I mean, to put it as simply as possible, design attracts, but copy content, written content sells. The pioneering advertising executive Shirley Polikoff said it so eloquently that copy is a direct conversation with the customer. So you need to be constantly communicating with the customer in order to kind of keep them interested, to keep the business relationship alive. But in general, not just, I mean, you're going to bring out my poetic side here.
A side I wasn't expecting, so let's go with that.
Well, yeah, it's been mercifully hidden in a desk drawer since my horrendous teenage stabbings at it, but anyway, I'll give it a shot. Words in general, they kind of bind us, they unite us, they can comfort us, but best of all, they connect us. So the ability to tell a complete story with just a single image is incredibly difficult, simply because we rely so heavily on words to convey a true meaning or to offer real depth. So yeah, I mean, words are vital because they are what connect us. They bring out the emotional response in us. And I don't always like talking about eliciting an emotional response in an audience, because that somehow feels a little bit cynical. It feels a bit manipulative. Why are you trying to pull at my heartstrings? But it's actually the way that all marketing works, really. You need to make an emotional connection with your customer. Even if you're selling something boring, there needs to be an element of an emotional connection. And the only way to do that is by assembling copy, because you do assemble copy in a way that's going to really connect with your target audience. So why is it important? For all of those reasons and a million more, really. I mean, I could talk about that all day. So do try and rein me in. Sorry, I'm a little bit like a toddler chasing bubbles sometimes with my train of thought. I'm just all over the place. So please do rein me in if you need to.
This should be entertaining then. So I suppose you talked about target audience then, but if somebody's sitting down to write a piece, whether that's going to be a blog or it's going to be an article or something of that nature, I suppose the first question is, how should they set about putting together that piece? What's the starting point?
Well, it's terrifying. I still get it. There is, you know, I can't remember who said it, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but a writer's worst nightmare is a blank piece of paper, or in the modern sense, you know, a blank screen. Where do I start? Now, the first piece of advice that I always give to anybody who is nervous about writing a piece is, you don't have to start at the beginning. One way I like to phrase it is, start in the middle and fight your way out. If there's certain elements of the content that you already know or are solidified, or there's a point that you are aware of that you feel confident in, you can start with that and build from it. You don't have to start at the beginning and just hurl yourself off that cliff into the unknown abyss. But I mean, in general, it's a tough question. Writing is, by all intents and purposes, an artwork, but there are certain formulas that one can apply. So knowing your target audience is absolutely vital. It's always vital. It's vital in every aspect of your business, but specifically with writing. I mean, market research, you need to do market research if you don't already know who you're trying to communicate with. I'd speak very differently to my best friend than I would to my grandmother. So knowing your audience means that you can control not just the message, but you know, you can also elicit the intended response, which is essentially what you're trying to do. So know your audience in that way. If you know your audience, you should have an idea of how to talk to them. So to build that bridge, you need to know what's on the other side, is what I'm saying.
How much detail should you go into in identifying your target audience then?
People tie themselves in knots with things like that kind of preparation. You are, you know, you represent your business. And if you're doing it well, then you are the best person to do that. You are the best person for the job that you are in. Therefore, you should know, you should be confident in what it is that you are selling and to whom you're selling it. And you should know that instinctively to a certain degree. If you are, you know, I have the luxury of not needing to, my audience is faceless to me, because there's a myriad of different people that would need my services. So I don't need to laser focus and hone down on, you know, specific socioeconomic status or gender or even anything along those lines. It's open to me. So I'm very lucky in that regard. What I need for somebody like myself, what I do need to be is slightly malleable in my communication. Again, I'd speak differently to my best friend than I would to my grandmother. So I need to be cautious of, you know, the style in which I speak, the tone. I wasn't sure how I was going to speak to you today. I can be very excitable and quite kiddie, and sometimes I can try and be very intellectual. So you just kind of need to fall into the rhythm of it. See, I'm doing it again. I'm chasing bubbles. My brain is going in one direction. I need to rein myself back. Sorry, I'm going to do this a lot because we're talking about something that I'm very passionate about.
No, that's brilliant. I love it. Yeah.
But you should, if you don't instinctively know who your audience is, if you can't envision them as a person in a physical form or know how to communicate to them, then yes, you need to do a little bit of market research. I say a little bit until you are comfortable in knowing who is, as I said, words build the bridge. You need to be confident in who is on the other side of that bridge. Yeah. So until you get to the point when you've got the rhythm, you've got the flow, you would know how to verbally communicate with that person in a conversation, you're good to go. Don't break yourself, because you will waste time, energy, and resources second guessing it, looking too much into it, so on and so forth. So you can go too far. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So so we got the audience. What next?
Yeah. Competitive analysis is always a good idea. I mean, I don't like this because it pulls me away from the art side of my writing. Yeah. But it is still a good idea. You need to know who else occupies the same market that you do, so you can assess whereabouts you fit into that market. Being honest with yourself about your weaknesses is vital, so that you can better play to your own strengths. I mean, equally, knowing your competitors' strengths and weaknesses allows you to fill open gaps or corner an aspect of the market that's hitherto untapped. I'm really glad I just got to insert the word hitherto into a conversation. That's word nerd points right there.
Yeah, I was going to say, whatever makes you happy, James.
Yeah, this makes me very happy, Rupert. I'm not going to lie. So at the same time, I wouldn't get too bogged down in that side of things necessarily, because ultimately you will have or will need to refine your branding voice so you are uniquely your own brand. Define and refine your branding voice so that it's unique to your business, and there will 9 times out of 10 be a place for you in whatever market you're a part of. So get a feel of, you know, the pond you're in and the other fish that are trying to get the same food as you.
Yeah.
Key themes is pretty important. I mean, before you write anything, you're going to need to know who the intended message is for, as we were talking about target audience. Yeah. But you need to know what you want the piece to achieve. That's vital to writing anything. So knowing who the audience is and what you want the piece to achieve, or the emotional response you want to elicit in them, that entirely informs the content. So laying out your key themes and sticking to them is the way to do it. I mean, there's something that I say in the workshops that I do. If it's vague, it has no value. And that's always true. Stay on course, and do that by plotting your course in advance. As I said before, copies assembled bit by bit. There's a trope in Hollywood and in TV shows where they try and depict a writer. Sex and the City was awful for this. They try and depict the writer as somebody that's just innately eloquent and can sit down and, you know, there's gold in their fingertips constantly. Sex and the City drove me crazy because it was, you know, you had this woman living this very kind of well-to-do lifestyle with all these, you know, rich friends and fancy dinners and nice shoes. And she earned her money from a single column that she would write at the end of the episode almost as an afterthought. And she would sit down, think for a second as she kind of, you know, took a drag on her cigarette, and then would sit down and just write the column front to back and close her laptop, and that's her money earned. And that drove me crazy, because that's not how it works. I mean, most of the time the goal, and this is a really important piece for people to understand who are nervous of writing, the gold is always in the edit. It won't just fall out of you. It is not innate in anybody. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Nathaniel Hawthorne said that easy reading is damn hard writing. Be prepared to write hard, and to do that you need a plot. Yeah. So there you go. Another one, tone of voice. I would say a branding voice is determined by the target audience and your core brand values. So again, these are elements that you need to prepare for in advance. You need to know who you are, you need to know what you're selling, you need to know who you're selling to, and you need to know how you want to represent yourself. So you need to choose a tone that's going to create the kind of reaction you want from your audience. Again, so it's vital to know your audience. So remember that style and tone are not the same thing. This is where a lot of people get bogged down. You need to consider style, tone, and voice. So style is the technical or mechanical choices behind your writing, the how you say it rather than the what you say. Tone is the attitude or effects that your writing has on the reader, so leading to specific emotions and responses. And the voice, or the branding voice, is the culmination of the style and the tone and the personality or character behind your brand.
Yeah.
So you need to consider all of those things before you start writing. So you need to know what your piece is before it starts.
Yeah.
Essentially, you need to know who you're writing to, what the content is effectively trying to communicate. And from there, you will find there is a natural flow. The information will come out of you.
Yeah.
Also, and at the risk of laboring my point, what I call the upside down triangle of importance as well. Not everybody that reads what you write is going to read everything you write. So think about it like a newspaper. You've got the headline at the top that grabs you, and headline will tell you whether or not you want to read the article at all. So a lot of people, 70% of people, won't move past the headline.
Yeah.
Then you go to the byline that kind of expands on the topic a little bit more. And then you go into, the first paragraph, which lays out the key themes and ideas. And then from there, we explore it further. You can get the gist of an article from the headline, the byline, and the first couple of paragraphs. So if you think about it like an upside down triangle, so you've got the point at the bottom, all the important information is at the top, and it gets ever so slightly less important as you go down. Don't save your gold for the middle of your piece. You need to draw people in immediately. So don't let equally don't let the headline trouble you too much, because as I said, you can start in the middle and fight your way out, create the body of work and use that to inform the headline.
Yeah, you're saying a lot of really reassuring things from my perspective here as well, because actually, first of all, so if I have to, I mean, obviously what I do, I write quite a lot of blogs and things like that. So, but I definitely the first draft is always a bit of a mess, and I look at it and it gets cleaned up in the edit, which you've just confirmed is a good thing to be doing. My background is quite corporate, so as I've moved into working with different sorts of companies, I'm very used to the very formal writing. It's nice, actually, from my perspective, to be able to write in a much more informal way, and also, of course, it's giving the tone of what we want Actioncoach to be as well. So how we would like Actioncoach to be other people, which we want as far as possible to be very much like Angela, myself, and the rest of the team as well. So we want to get that feel in the way that we write, and you've supported that as well. And I also love the fact about the headlines. I'm a big believer in the heading for each section, telling you basically the message you want the reader to take away from that section. And you've just told me that's a good thing to do as well, which I think is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, David. Just more of this. Just keep telling me I'm doing a good job. I'll be happy.
Yeah, that's it. I'm here to just stroke your ego and tell you that you're doing fine. Yes. I mean, a lot of the time, people just, like a lot of things in life, people just need reassurance.
Yeah,
it is scary. You can sit there in your mind and you think you can understand something. I mean, I could sit there and read up on the theory of, you can stand there and tell a kid exactly what he needs to do to ride a bike.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean he can ride a bike until he or she gets on it and actually puts this into practice, and it's trial and error. I mean, going back to the thing that you were saying before, you never like your first draft. That's a good thing. Martin Scorsese, the film director, said in an interview, if as a filmmaker you like your first cut, then you are in serious trouble, because you're not working hard enough. You should watch your first cut and be devastated. In the same way, it's okay to look at your first draft and be devastated, because if you know where you're going wrong, you know how to kind of steer the ship in the right direction.
Yeah.
But for most people, it's starting to write. So there's a few things that people can do. There's a few tips, I guess, that people can follow. There's two kind of brain dumps, really, purges or dumps. There's if you have an abundance of ideas and you don't know where to start with them, that's your first purge. Sit down, type or write whatever is quickest, either your hand or your fingers.
Yeah.
And just get all of your ideas out in one long stream of consciousness. Sorry. You don't need to worry about spelling, punctuation, or grammar. If you can't think of a word, just ignore it and keep going. Just let it blur out of your brain. It's the same if you have no idea what to write, because your brain is sitting there going, oh no, this is terrible, I'm terrified, what am I going to do? Then write that. oh my goodness, I'm so nervous of this. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm terrified, blah, 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 and just purge it, just vomit it out. And then your brain kind of reaches this kind of weird Zen calm. And then you can start approaching, okay, who is my audience? What emotion am I trying to elicit? What message am I trying to communicate? And from there, things will actually develop naturally. It's kind of an organic flow. And then, as I said before, the gold is in the edit. So just trust that eventually it will come together.
Yeah. Again, I'm a big believer in mind maps. Actually, online, do it on the computer, but do a mind map, because that's, in my head, that's the best way to dump all the information out.
Right.
And of course, it allows you to drag things around, so you can group it into different headings, and then you can start to look at the structure of the whole document as well. So generally, I start the document with a mind map. Once I've got the mind map, actually writing the document is pretty easy. It's just putting it into English as much as anything else, isn't it?
That's it. A lot of it is in the preparation, and then the bulk of the rest of it is in the edit. So the bit that people are ultimately scared of is really the part that kind of comes organically. You know, fortune favors the prepared, as does, you know, good writing. You know, so but yeah, you're absolutely right about, you know, breaking things down with kind of mini headers and stuff like that. That's always a wonderful way of doing it. It actually, psychologically, it's a good idea, because it gives the reader kind of micro breaks, lets them know that they're not wading through this dense, you know, swathe of information that might end up being a bit boring, and they slowly start to kind of, their mind drifts. It's also good psychologically, because it's a good trick to kind of make the reader think that there is value in the content to come. If there's another mini headline below, if there's another subheader below, that means that there's important content under that subheader. So it's a really good trick for ensuring, you know, it breaks up the content, it breaks up the flow, it convinces everyone to read everything, essentially. So yeah, it is a very, very good idea, and I use it as often as I possibly can, even in stuff like blogs. You know, people have a penchant of waffling. Sorry, go on. I'm waffling now.
People are really busy these days as well. I mean, they don't. It's like, you think about how you read the Sunday papers. I'd love to sit down with the papers all around me on a Sunday afternoon and read the papers. And you don't read it. You don't read every article. You read the headline. I might read half of the article and then decide to move on. So it's just keeping that attention going through it. So everything you say makes perfect sense, doesn't it? From
that's it. See, it seems like an art form, but you can turn it into a science to a certain degree. I like to consider myself an artist because I write in my spare time. You know, I write comic books and fiction and other such things. So there is a kind of egotistical side of me that is, you know, the artist at play. But in terms of trying to communicate to people to stop them from fearing writing, I think is a really important thing. I mean, I found relatively early on in being a copywriter that a lot of people felt that they could do what I do. And in a lot of ways, yes, that's true. A lot of people can. And there is a way to teach people how to do that. I actually run workshops. There's a little cheeky personal plug, but I run workshops to teach people how to not need me anymore. And I get just as solid a satisfaction out of knowing that I've kind of awoken something in somebody, or found a formula, or, you know, a kind of a golden, perfect phraseology that has awoken something in someone that enables them to go on and represent their business effectively, communicate effectively with their audience. Like, I love that just as much as I love being bought, you know, a unique piece of writing that I get to play with myself. It's really good fun. But what I'm trying to teach people is not to fear the process, but to trust the process. Because there really is a formula. And at the same time, you get to have fun with it. You get to play with it. You asked me earlier, why is language vital? Language is vital because it's so different. I mean, it's ubiquitous, obviously, but it's so different. I fell in love with writing and reading at an early age through people like Roald Dahl and Spike Milligan, people that played with language, that chewed with language. And I think a lot of people are scared to do that in writing, especially for their businesses. Take a risk. I mean, humor is always risky. I never advise humor unless you've got an absolute slam dunk, because you can really turn people off if you're trying to be funny and it doesn't land. But you can still be whimsical, you can still be fun, you can still be friendly, you can still be playful. And I absolutely encourage that. You mentioned again earlier, you were talking about writing for Actioncoach and how you want to draw people in that way. I mean, what you do, I've used your services and you were wonderful. Your advice was absolutely fantastic and it was so personable. So I think the trick for someone like you is to kind of take this idea of the kind of stuffed shirt kind of, you know, this is how you run a business, you know, that kind of stuffy concept, and make it personal.
I like your impression of me there, Tim.
That wasn't you. No, that wasn't you. That was people's perceptions of people like you or do the roles that you do.
Yeah.
You know, it's not what I'm saying. This, I don't mean to be insulting when I say this. You don't have the most rock and roll job in the world. You are good at what you do, but it's not super rock and roll. But what you can do and what you have room to do is make it personable. Yeah. And I think you've done a really good job with that. I mean, I certainly felt like it was easy to talk to you because you made it easy to talk to me. You made it personable. Yeah. So yeah, I'm forever grateful for that conversation.
Thank you for that. And also, of course, actually, with any sort of writing, if you don't try it, you're never going to get any better, are you? You've got to start somewhere, and the first bits you write, you're going to hate. You've got to practice until you get something that you like as well.
Sure, and with the new medium of social media, you kind of have room for error. You can trial and error. You can send out 3 tweets or what have you, whatever, Instagram posts, whatever, that don't land. It doesn't mean you're written off for good. Yeah. You can recover that the next day with a decent post, or you only really have to hit the nail on the head maybe half the time in order to keep people interested. So there's a beauty there. There's a room for failure. There's jazz there. Do you know what I mean? You can riff, you can improvise, and that's good. I encourage that.
Yeah. Also, the other thing that was going through my head, because you got the picture of the Ninja Turtles behind you as well, got my mind thinking.
That's not actually the Ninja Turtles. That's Star Wars. I'm a bit of a Star Wars.
It? Sorry,
it is.
Yeah.
No, it's Star Wars characters dressed up as samurai. My brother gave it to me. It's very odd, but yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure that's better or worse. So pictures and diagrams in your piece as well. What would you advise around pictures and diagrams when people are writing articles, blogs, etc.?
I encourage it a lot, as long as you do it intelligently. Again, we come back to what the kind of genesis of all of this, which is know your target audience. If you're trying to communicate with somebody visually, then you need to be aware of who your audience is just as much as if you do it through the written word. So you need to select an image that aspirational living tends to work very, very well. But mostly what people want to see, maybe a little bit more so, or at least the intelligent consumer wants to see, is a reflection of themselves. Perhaps a reflection of themselves at a heightened level. Sure, aspirational living is essentially what all advertising is kind of based on, convincing people that they're not quite good enough and this is the place that they need to get to. So know who your audience is so that you can select images that will represent them in a way that they can connect with emotionally. Don't just shove a picture in there for the sake of it. But because the modern world, almost all of our mediums are very, very visual now. I mean, graphic novels are extremely popular. Video games are a very popular method of storytelling. Everyone watches, Netflix and films and so on and so forth. And equally, almost every medium has an element of imagery in there. So it's a good idea to get it in there with blogs. I mean, it's the same principle really as what I was saying about the mini headers, the way that it breaks it up. Any way that you can deliver information in a slightly different form helps the reader stay engaged. It makes it a little bit more fun. If you can turn something into a list or a chart or represent it in another visual form, then yeah, I absolutely encourage doing that. Just don't go crazy, otherwise it just becomes a little bit too much. There are certain infographics that are a little bit too OTT with their visuals, and you kind of don't really know where to look.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, I'm waffling again, but yeah, I do encourage it to a certain degree.
So common mistakes in writing. What are the common mistakes that people should avoid making?
Oh God, Christ. That's a difficult one. I personally don't make mistakes, so it's hard for me to know. Overthinking things. Absolutely overthinking things. Offering up an abundance of information. People often think that they need to include absolutely everything. People that are writing for their own businesses are worried about leaving out details that they perceive to be vital, whereas in 99% of cases, you can strip almost all of it out. And economize your content, an economy of words. Don't think that an abundance is better for you. I don't think I've ever read an entire blog that's over 1,000 words or more. That's an essay, and essays have their place. That's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's totally okay to write essays, but if you lure someone in under the pretense of a blog and then you waffle on for 2,000 words, you have to be an extraordinarily gifted writer writing about a very gripping topic to keep people interested for that amount of time. So yeah, that's always my main thing. Don't fear it. I would always say a lot of people are really scared of it. What I said earlier, a lot of people think that they have to start at the beginning. You don't have to do that. You can fight your way out from the middle. Don't start with your headline, things like that. People try to be, they mix up their perspective. They mix up, sometimes, I mean, in worst cases, I've seen people mix up their third and first person, which is kind of terrifying. You know, they chop and change. They've not really found their voice. So they need to kind of, that's my main piece of advice here, I think, is solidify your voice, define and refine your branding voice before you really start. But spelling, punctuation, and grammar is always a huge thing. I'm not going to name them because that would be awful, but I had a friend who started a business, and their business is fantastic. And I offered my services because I loved their business.
Yeah.
I offered my services for free. I said, I will do your landing page on your website because I really believe in you and I really want this to succeed. And they said, no, you know what? I got this. And I was like, all right, okay, sure, go ahead. 3 weeks later, I went online, I looked at their website, and within the first paragraph, there were 8 spelling and punctuation grammars.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for everyone, but I'm not that much of a grammar Nazi. But if I see something professional that is misspelt or sloppy in its spelling and punctuation and grammar, then immediately I lose respect for the brand. I think, what value do you have in your product or service? You've diminished it immediately. Yeah. So I suppose the advice that I would give there is either have somebody else proofread it, like myself, or on a simpler term, download an app or called Grammarly. Yeah. It's desktop. You can get it for Mac, you can get it for PC, you can get it on your phone, and that's a godsend. It's absolutely fantastic because it kind of it forces you from a passive voice into an active voice. Another problem that a lot of people have, they write passively rather than actively.
Want to explain the difference, Joe?
I'll give you an example. Active, thousands of tourists visit the Grand Canyon every year. Passive, the Grand Canyon is visited by thousands of tourists every year. So passive is kind of slow and descriptive. It doesn't have any, passive is passive. It doesn't have an interest in activating your enthusiasm. Active shoves it front and center. Every single magazine article you will read, every single newspaper article, anything that's dynamic, and gosh, I hate that word, dynamic. That's overused. I'll come back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
It is in the active voice. It's active. It's keeping you going. It's punchy. It's out there. It's not lazy. It's not slow. It's not passive. Does that make sense? I mean, sometimes I understand things and I don't know how to articulate them perfectly, but
I fully understand that problem as well. Something you intellectually understand and you have to explain to somebody else. It can be a bit of a challenge remembering how you learned it in the first place. But yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. Like again, irony. If someone asks me to explain what irony is, I go back to the most childish and simplistic level of understanding of it, which is 2 bald men fighting over a comb, which was a joke I learned in primary school. What is irony? 2 bald men fighting over a comb. But
boring is I still laugh.
yeah. Well, yeah, the classics. But it's less of a joke and more of a really beautifully simplistic stab at what irony actually is. Even a child can understand it. So that's sometimes simplicity is best. I don't think I've achieved that with trying to explain what's active and passive, but that is a problem that people fall into. Just at the risk of waffling again, I'll try and I'm chasing bubbles again. Sorry, but people tend to overuse the same language. If I, when I was in a previous job and I had to, I was part of the recruitment process, and I would read CV after, resume after resume after resume where people were claiming to be dynamic. It's like, what do you even mean? When a company is describing themselves as, oh, we're a dynamic company, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Dynamic's one of those words where you need to unzip it and get to the core of what you're actually trying to say, because there's a myriad of different things that dynamic suggests, but it's so vague. And again, if it's vague, it has no value. It's just a buzzword. It's just a buzzword. So avoid buzzwords. People tend to go for language that they think people use for a reason, but don't. Find your voice. If you wouldn't say that in conversation when representing, if you're pitching, let's say you're pitching your business in a networking setting, if someone says the word dynamic, I immediately disregard them. And that's so snobby. I know it is. But at the same time, it's important, because what they're doing is they're buying into the concept of something without actually exploring what the value of that concept is.
Yeah.
What value am I giving you? I'm just using these buzzwords, and you turn into a snake oil salesman. And people don't like BS. They will smell it a mile away. Intelligent people will smell BS a mile away. And that you can't, one of the things that I teach people in terms of how to write for themselves, never offer a sales pitch. It's never a sales pitch. It's just a conversation with your customer. What are your features? What are the benefits of those features? And what emotional response are you trying to elicit through that benefit?
Yeah.
At no point. Yeah, sorry, go on.
It leads us nicely on, actually, because there must be a difference in the way that you would write for different mediums as well. So if you're writing a proposal for one of your clients, obviously the way you would approach that is going to be very different to the way you maybe write a blog, or you'd write a post on Facebook. So, how should people approach those differently? What are the things they should be thinking about?
Great question. And something that I think a lot of people get stuck on, or a lot of people get complacent. They've written one decent thing and they just kind of do the same, just repeat that kind of style ad nauseum. I mean, there are wildly different. I mean, if you're writing a white paper, it's essentially an authority report. You need to come from a point of authority. If you are not the point of authority, you are not the person to write that. But then again, if you are, then you simply write what you know. It becomes almost academic. On the flip side to that, say a social media post where, an economy of words is the best way to go. You need to communicate a message using, as in a briefer time as possible. So you approach that with trim every ounce of fat you possibly can, so that all that's left is the meat. It's a condensed core message. As soon as the reader has read it, they need to have understood it, processed it, and they need to have something to do as a result of it. So there needs to be a call to action at the same time. So that's one thing to bear in mind. If you're writing an article, again, what we were talking about earlier, it's informed by essentially what emotional response you want the audience to have, and who the audience is in the first place. That informs the content. So the medium in which you deliver it, there are certain rules and regulations. I mean, websites need to be relatively brief, but if they're too brief, it's not enough. Social media needs to be short and snappy. Things like authority reports or white papers need to be more in-depth and analytical, because you're coming from from that perspective. So if you're unsure as to what the rules are, just Google it. Don't be afraid of Googling something like that. What is the general accepted word count for this? What's the generally accepted layout? What's the generally accepted person? Is it best to write first person or third person? That kind of thing. So you really need to kind of understand what it is that you are ultimately trying to convey. And then there will always be regulations kind of that constrict you to a certain degree, or guide you is probably a better way of putting it, that guide you in terms of how you're supposed to deliver that information. So there is a lot of help out there. There is a ton of help on Google. Don't just go with one source, because there are conflicting ways of doing things. And if something doesn't fit you, then you don't have to do it. You don't have to put it on. You can find somebody that phrases something in a way that connects with you, that is the kind of key to unlocking your ability to do that. But also at the same time, I think it's really important to recognize your limitations. I mentioned to you before that I write comic books. What absolutely drives me balmy is that I can't draw, because then I'd be a one-man army. I could just produce all of my own content. And I've met artists, very talented artists, tattoo artists, graphic novelists, artists, who are, they all do that thing where they put their arm around you and they're like, buddy, anybody can draw. If I can do it, you can do it. Just put in the yards. And I've done it. I sat down, I tried, I put in the yards, and I can't do it. And it's okay. It's okay. It's not defeatist to say that you can't do it. So I'd love it personally as a copywriter when somebody comes to me and says, I need this piece of writing doing, this is my stab at it. Can you take over? That's my favorite thing to do, because then I know exactly where they're going, exactly what they want, and I can give them exactly what they want. All I do is I reform and restructure and jazz it up. But I'd love that. That's fantastic. So know your limits. Don't be scared to ask for help, and just get out there and look on the internet to understand what the kind of formulas are for these different mediums, because it's all out there.
Good advice, very good advice. Jamie, it's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Rupert.
Really,
I do apologise
really
if I hogged the conversation. I do have a penchant to waffle, so I do apologise if that was the case.
That's fine. The key thing is just actually what I love is your passion for your subject. And it's just it so comes across. That's absolutely brilliant. And obviously you're so knowledgeable. This is something you've obviously spent a lot of time learning and honing your craft. And obviously that's true as well. Just simply wanting to convey it to other people, I think, is fantastic. So, Jamie, if somebody does want to work with you, Words by Jim, how do they contact you?
You can call me. You might catch me slightly off guard, but you can reach me on 07379 399 488. I am, as you can probably tell by this conversation, I am somebody that likes to verbally communicate. I think you get a better sense for people. So if you're also like that, then please feel free to give me a call or send me a text or find me on WhatsApp. Alternatively, you can go to my website at www.words-by-jim.com. And I've not actually spent the time on my new website in terms of SEO, which is it's an absolute crime. So if you Google me, you might not find me on the first page. So yeah, words-by-jim.com. Alternatively, you can email me at jamie@words-by-jim.com again. And I do have a slight presence on Facebook, but I loathe social media with a passion. So I prefer it if you didn't go on there, because I've let that kind of run dry a little bit. But yeah, just come, the ways that I told you, come find me, come talk to me. I'm always happy to talk to people about what it is that they need, where they would like to go, or simply to give them advice. I also do workshops. I can do them in person when it's not in lockdown. I can come to you, or you can come to me. I also do them digitally via Zoom. So I do different kinds of bespoke workshops for different companies and different people that basically teaches them how to elicit their natural branding voice. Yeah. So what I do is instead of fobbing people off with things like, oh, you need to, you need to write like this, or you need to say this. What I do is I take a look at the kind of cliches and I pull them apart and dissect them and give each person a stepping stone so that their process is laid out before them and they feel confident in finding their voice and confident in conveying it and talking to their audience.
Excellent. Cool. Excellent. Jamie, thank you for your time today. It's been lovely.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rupert.
Thanks for so knowledgeable and so much passion there as well. It's great. And yeah, so obviously we'll catch up again at some point in the future. Great.
That would be great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So Jamie Goldthorpe, Words by Jim. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks.